we got to start over?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Bastard.
Hey, it's the first time this happened.
I'm sure that's never happened before.
Is there a light on the camera that we know they're on?
No.
No?
No, there's not.
They're not fancy like that. Okay.
No. It was the video board over here was messed up, but I've got it fixed now.
Are we good? We're rolling?
Well, that was a good,
See if I can do that
good
again.
practice.
All right. That was a good
Rehearsal.
practice. All right, folks. In the interest of complete transparency, which I always believe in complete transparency, except for when I don't. But this is one of those times. But this is one of those times I'm going to come clean and say that this is actually take two. How far were we into it? We were probably, well, you hadn't said much.
I hadn't said a thing yet,
You hadn't said a
so
thing
we were
yet.
okay.
Yeah, so I'm going to start. I don't think I can do it exactly the same way that I did. So I'm going to start by saying that I'm here with Jim Martin, and I've already practiced your name a couple of times.
That's right, Mike.
And you have one of those exotic international names. It's hard to.
Yeah. It is a unique name.
Jim Martin, and we're going to talk about who you are. We already, well, let's see. What all did I say about you? You're Dan's friend.
I'm Dan's friend, and this is his studio.
And this is his studio, and Dan and I, we've done some other episodes for other shows here. And when he put me in touch with you, you were going to be on the Oil and Gas Tech podcast, which I'm still doing. So tech fans, don't go away from that. That's for the Oil and Gas Global Network. But this is a new show, and Dan said
I'd feel better in this because I haven't been in the oil and gas industry in 30 years. But I was very involved in oil and gas from a different perspective,
but you
might find interesting.
Okay, so let's get to that. This book, I can't remember. Did I say this in the first part or the second part?
Well, let's talk about the book. What's the name of the book?
So the book is The Epic of America. Now, this is what I was explaining. Dan and I are going to record episode 1 later. During that time, I'm pretty sure that I'm going to explain this in more detail.
Right.
However, just to kind of set the stage, and it doesn't hurt people to hear it again, especially since we're kicking off a new show. The Epic of America was written by James Truslow Adams. I think I'm saying that right. Truslow? James Truslow Adams. So the phrase, the American dream, this is where we get it from. He's the first person.
But now, why didn't he name the book American Dream?
It's almost like we talked about this already. So he didn't name. So he wanted to name the book The American Dream, but it came out in 1931, and the publishers decided that the middle of the Depression wasn't a good time. Like a book called The American Dream probably wasn't going to sell.
Not in the middle of the Depression, and probably wouldn't be very good.
So we called it The Epic of America. Now, the interesting thing, and I didn't even realize this until I got the book and was reading it, that the reference to the American Dream doesn't happen at the beginning of the book. It's not a prescription for the American Dream. It's actually in the epilogue at the end.
Yeah.
Now this, by the way, is a 1932 edition. It was first print, so it's not a first printing, but it's pretty close. 1932. So the page numbers are still according to the original format, and so the first thing is where he first mentions the American Dream. It's on page 404. Huh. So 404, as you know, on the internet means this page is not found.
404 error.
So it's on 404, which I think is incredibly ironic. But I'm just gonna. So this show is going to be about you, but I'm going to throw this out there just to kind of set the stage. Here's what he actually said, and it wasn't a prescription. It's actually it's a historic look back, and at the end of it, he says, we have created in this country this situation that he found to be very good for society. And here's how he says, the dream of a land, the dream, I feel like I should have like a Morgan Freeman voice.
Yeah.
The dream of a land in which life should be better and richer and fuller for everyone, with opportunity for each according to his ability or achievement. And then a little further down, he says, it's not just a dream of motor cars and high wages merely, but a dream of a social order in which each man and each woman shall be able to attain to the fullest stature of which they are innately capable and be recognized by others for what they are, regardless of the fortuitous circumstances of birth or position. So basically, so to translate that, since nobody talks that way anymore, no matter who you are, where you came from, what your family is, what your situation, everybody has the same opportunity to achieve better, richer, fuller. And later he says, we've created, and we've realized that nowhere has it been realized more fully than here, even though we've done it very imperfectly. He says, like we haven't done it perfectly, but this is where it's been done the best. So I'm just going to put that. So that's kind of where we want to get to is from your view of life, how do we look with respect to that? Are we doing, how is it? How should it be? Do people still believe in that? Should they believe in it? Is it achievable? But let's start with you. So you have, and you gave me I got your notes right here. Uh-oh. This is Jim Martin, the authorized autobiography, which is it's an easy read. It's a quick read.
It's a short read.
Yeah, but you're from here, right?
I am. My dad was in the oil business.
Here's Houston, by the way.
Yes, we are in Houston. My dad was in the oil business, and it's funny. I tell people where I lived in Houston and Illinois and New York and New Orleans and all this stuff, and they just assume I was a military brat. But no, I was an oil brat.
Yeah,
which is a lot more common around here.
Damn near the same thing, really.
Very similar.
Yeah.
I was born in Illinois, moved to New Orleans, and then to Houston, and then Connecticut, and then back to Houston because he moved around with the oil company. Finally settled here and went to junior high and high school here, Lake City, Clear Creek High School, and then
Lake City. That was way out there.
Lake City was
it's on the way to Galveston. Basically.
Back then, it was still a rural farm community. A lot of rice farms, a lot of open areas. Our school, our Clear Creek High School, was kind of like the end of the road when you had there was nothing between the school and Kemah.
Yeah.
That was all just vacant land. And now, of course, it's all built up, South Shores, part of development and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So then after that, attended Baylor University and got a Bachelor of Arts degree, Business Administration, and went to work for Brown and Root.
So because I already know a lot about what you ended up doing, the fact that you got a BA in Business Administration is not really congruent with like because that's the degree that everybody gets when they don't really know what they want to do.
Well, it was interesting, and my roommate was back then. That was kind of the beginning in the early '80s when they had the BBA, Bachelor of Business Administration, and then a BA, Bachelor of Arts, right? So there were two different schools there. The business school and the arts and sciences school.
Right.
I wanted to be in the arts and sciences school because I was interested in business, but I was also interested in the arts and science and archaeology and geology and things like that, not so much pure business.
I love that that there's still somebody walking around who can use the word arts and sciences in the same sentence, because nowadays we seem to have really...
Well, we've lost that. And the joke with my roommate and he was an accountant. He was in the Bachelor of Arts, or the Business Administration School, the Hankamer School of Business. And we would joke that we both had business associate's degree, or business degrees, business administration's degrees. But at cocktail parties, I could talk about something other than business. I could talk about music. I could talk about art. I could talk about sports. He could only talk about finance and accounting and marketing.
So, all right. So we're gonna park on your story for just a second. I want to branch off on something right there. One of the things that we see happening in society today, there's a tremendous emphasis on what we now call STEM education, right?
Right, science, technology.
Right, which leads to a lot of specialization, right? We're sort of kind of creating a the next wave of grown-ups.
Well, I think that's because we've lost mathematics and basic science and all of that in the elementary and junior high schools. So we're being forced to focus on that now. Whereas before, when we grew up, we took math, we took science,
we got it out of the way early,
and we learned on it, we progressed through it, and we built upon it, and we continued it throughout our high school and even into college when we took mathematics classes, physics classes, and all that stuff. But nowadays, there doesn't seem to be as much teaching of that in the primary schools like there used to be. So. And the scores have reflected that, how the people are falling behind. So it kind of
makes you wonder, like, what are they? I may be behind on my social media feeds, but like, what are they teaching if they're not doing that? I mean,
and we are falling behind. I think, worldwide. You look at the figures of other countries and stuff, and I think we're focusing more on STEM simply because we didn't do that. We stopped doing that in the early years.
Got it. But doesn't that also create, in terms of having a well-balanced society, or people who know how to go to a cocktail party and talk about something other than, we're kind of losing that, like what you used to, like the liberal arts education.
Yes.
Right. Which and what came with that was not just being able to comment on music and art, but there was a certain cognitive kind of component to that. Right.
Right. You took philosophy, you took debate, you took those kinds of courses that enhanced your mind. And there's lots of debate nowadays with the cost of colleges and all this stuff about, getting a degree in basket weaving. That's really what I want to study.
Yeah.
Well, that's not really a liberal arts degree. A liberal arts degree gives you a more rounded perspective. You could still be focused.
Right.
Because back in the early days, and perhaps you should have an educator on here that talks about.
It's a good idea.
How that started, because the BBA, the Bachelor of Business Administration, I think is kind of a newer, a newer degree. What did you have in the old days? You could get a Bachelor of Science, or Bachelor of Arts, or they made a combination Bachelor of Arts and Science.
Right.
You were either going to be a mechanical engineer or a chemical engineer in the engineering field, or you're going to go into political science, or go into law, or maybe go into biology, go into medicine.
Yeah.
Those were kind of your major areas, and they've since kind of got diluted and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Somebody else more qualified, obviously,
that's
to
good
talk
idea.
about that.
Because I think that in some of that was learning or developing different ways to think about things, and to like different perspectives and ways to contemplate, like so you're not so
it's all part of common sense. And unfortunately, Michael, I think we're losing a lot of that common sense. You're losing a lot of people's ability to pick up a newspaper or to listen to a newscast and critically analyze it and think about it, and not just ingest it and regurgitate it.
Yeah.
But to think about when you read and I still read the paper. I read 2 papers every day, and
I get one a week. But it's an actual
I'm just
paper.
more tactile.
Right. Yeah.
I like the paper feel. And when I travel, of course, I get it on my iPad and all that kind of stuff. But you got people have lost the ability to read an article and realize how slanted it is and how wrong it is, and what obvious perspective they come from.
Yeah,
that's what we're losing, and that's what they teach you in the liberal arts, is the ability to think about things and realize that's not right. Okay, that's not right, but what's your argument against it, or what's your counter argument? I could say, I don't like your shirt. I think that's an ugly shirt.
Yeah.
Because I don't like the pattern, because I don't like Hawaiian
my wife
stuff,
she was right.
or something like that.
Yeah.
Not just, I don't like your shirt. I think that's an ugly shirt.
Yeah, it shouldn't be that way. You shouldn't have it. Now, I don't know, some people might agree with you, but I think some of that too comes from, because if you because even if you read something or you hear about something and you analyze it and you come up with your own opinion, even if your own view or your own opinion of that actually isn't as good as like if it's garbage and you recognize that it's garbage, that's good. But and that might actually be pretty good. But you come to a different conclusion. You're still, even if your new opinion is garbage,
right?
You still like used your brain to think about it. And I think what happens now, I was talking with somebody about this recently. I said, starting and this goes back to, and you and I, before we turned on the mics, we were talking about early days of the internet with the bulletin boards and Archie and Gopher and things. Also somewhere around that same time was when we started the 24-hour news cycle, right, with cable news,
right, CNN,
and then it became internet news, and then it became social media. And in order to fill up, it's almost a practical thing. In order to fill up all of that cycle, they have to generate so back in the day when we just read like the paper, in the evening or whatever.
Well, twice a day. Remember, we had the Chronicle in the morning and the Post in the evening.
But we didn't have this like 24/7 stream.
No, you had time to just stop and think about it and go on about your business. You didn't worry about it from 9 to 5 because you were working and you were taking care of your family or you're going to a ball game or something like that.
Yeah, right. And so the question is, now we have news being fed to us every hour, every minute of every day. Is there an order of magnitude more news happening in the world than there was then? We're just saying a lot more about it. So now what we have is you get fed to you. Not only do you get the information, but you get told what the information means, what you should think about it, and what you should do about it. Like all of that comes to you. And partially it's just a function of having to fill up all that time, right? All that space.
And they have to, I'm sure our audience is familiar with clickbait information. Well, the CNNs and the Foxes and all these other people do the same thing. These shows, and I do watch the news shows, and they always say breaking news. And I'm thinking, okay, what's breaking?
Right. Who invaded a country?
They're just saying that there was a hurricane in Puerto Rico last week, and they're still trying to recover. Well, that's not breaking. You probably remember when there was breaking news, when you're watching, I hate to say it, I Dream of Jeannie or Gunsmoke or something.
Yeah, and they would stop and the news would come.
And then breaking news. And
that was usually because like a president had been shot or a Zeppelin had exploded or something.
A country was invaded, Vietnam, something or other. But now that's constantly. And I think it's detrimental. I think it gets people too focused on what's happening in California, what's happening in North Carolina, what's happening in North Dakota. Well, we live here in Houston. We've got a good life here in Houston. Am I concerned about what happens in California? Not really.
Yeah.
But
not every day.
Not every day. I don't need to know that the price of gasoline has gone up to $7 in Sacramento.
Right. It's a distraction. So if you come back to Mr. Adams and his book, by the way, no relation to the presidential Adamses.
Right.
But if you come back to Mr. Adams in his book, he says, and again, he wasn't prescribing something for the future. He was saying we've arrived at this place, unlike a lot of other countries. And he was, in that point in time, 1931, you're 150 years into the forming of this country. So
you're not that far from the Civil War either.
Not far from it, right. And so a lot of what was in his mind when he was thinking unlike other places was other societies, let's say in Europe or other places where they were based very much on what family you were born into and what property you owned and things like this, right? But if you take it more broadly and you say, like everybody, no matter what your station, does have the opportunity to pursue life in this kind of better, richer, fuller way. Now that we've done this to ourselves with this news thing, are we helping or hurting our ability to do that?
I think it's causing a lot of anxiety. I think it causes a lot of unnecessary issues to be concerned about. I think we're losing focus on, going to work, doing our job, taking care of our families.
Which are the things that kind of help create that.
Well, and that's part of the American fabric and all that, the American family, and of course we could talk all about the breakdown of that and what's going on with that, to breakdown of religious values in America, the church in America,
which turns out religious values are useful. Even even if you don't, and this is coming from being somebody who's a good Catholic, but even if you don't believe that the object of the religion exists, the values are actually quite useful.
The values are good, and they're good common values, and they're not unique to one religion, but they're good guardrails on society. Don't go around killing people, don't go around stealing stuff, don't go around doing wanton stupid stuff,
or some of the less graphic things or less obvious things like the focus on others instead of yourself.
Exactly, helping other people,
and things like this. Okay, so I want to get back to your story, because that's actually really because there's a part in your story that connects to this right here. So you went to school, you got this degree in business administration, blah blah blah. Then you ended up doing really interesting stuff. So you bounced around the oil and gas. You worked you had the opportunity to work in the Reagan administration, but Ronnie called and you told him no.
No, I said I'll take the job.
Oh, you did say okay.
I did take the job. I got into as a political appointee up in Washington, dealing with congressional and public affairs. Between the Customs Service, I joined
political appointee in Washington dealing with
congressional and public affairs. In other words, I was with the Customs Service, right? You got Customs, you got FBI, you got IRS, you've got all these agencies of the executive branch, and they have to interact with the legislative branch, right? Because the legislative branch provides them the money,
right?
So they want to know how that money is spent, or what kind of projects do you need the money on. It's part of that. If you might recall the three branches of government, the executive, judicial, and legislative, which I think is lost on a lot of people nowadays, and what their purposes are.
I learned that in school, actually.
Right, we learned that in civics. And economics.
I think
things like that.
I think it's still true, although they don't always behave the way that I learned that they were supposed to behave.
Yeah, but that's a topic for another story.
That is another story.
So anyway, I was kind of part of the liaison between Congress and the Customs Service, or Congress or the Customs Service and the public. Like when they had a big seizure or something, we'd have to write up something and all that, deal with the magazines and the newspapers and stuff. It was a political job. It was a political appointee job, and it was only going to be for 4 years. And so,
how did you get spotted for this?
Well, it was through a family connection, which is
okay.
It just kind of worked.
Is there a certain corner that you hang out, and somebody drives up, and the window goes down, and they go, "You look like
in the dark hat and the gabardine." Right. Anyway, I did that. And it was just going to be temporary, because the oil and gas industry, I was with Brown and Root, and people were kind of getting laid off every week. Every Monday I'd come in, there'd be a few more empty desks. So I thought, well, you know what?
Oh, this was 80s, right?
This was 80. This was 81, 82.
Yeah, coming right into what was going to be really bad.
Yeah, the oil industry was going pretty bad. And I had this opportunity, so I thought, well, you know what? I'll do it for a couple of years. I talked to my managers at Brown and Root, and they said, you take the opportunity, you're always welcome to come back. I never came back. I got to know what the Customs Service does, what the purpose of the Customs Service and the government, right, to collect and protect the revenue of the United States. And that's what Customs does. In your book, I think just before the book was published, the only way, you have the government, right? And the government starts out, and government has to have money to raise the military and to take care of buildings and the postal service and all that kind of stuff.
To forgive college loans.
So where does it get its money? Things. Where do countries get their money when they first start out? They tax goods coming in and out of the country, right? Tariffs.
Right.
And that's what the Customs Service.
Yes, I learned that. I learned about that in real life once after my wife and I had taken a trip to Venice among other places. And we went to the Murano glass factory, where there are incredibly good salesmen there. And, they give you a glass of champagne, and the next thing you know, you're paying ridiculous amounts of money for stuff that some guy made, like blood glass. And I only thought it was expensive until they shipped it back, and I got a call from the saying, here's the
duty, the duty on
this. And because it was a luxury item, it was almost it was probably half again as much as what we paid for the thing. And then I thought, I've been had. So that was really. So I don't know if you had anything to do with that or not.
No, that wasn't me.
That wasn't me. Yeah,
but the. That's the purpose of customs. And then I got to meet some of the agents, the federal agents, special agents with customs, and seemed like an interesting job.
Yeah.
And it was the only job, again, dealing with the Customs Service, being a special agent with U.S. Customs is the only job that's under the purview of the government that you can't get in the private sector. The government is tasked with enforcing the laws. Legislation makes the law. Somebody's got to enforce it. You got to pay taxes on this. You can't defraud people. Well, who enforces those laws but the government, and the government agents do that. And so I became a special agent down in Miami, enjoyed it. I was young. I wasn't married. I was single, having a good time in Miami.
Married. Yeah.
And got there right at the tail end of the cocaine wars in 83, 85.
Wow.
Saw a lot. And I said, this is what I like to do. This is fun. So I ended up staying and doing that.
So this is a little bit of a tangent, but what is a day in the life of a customs agent? Like what?
We do a lot of different things. We kind of we're not as well known as the FBI or the DEA or ATF, but we all... we all do the same thing. We're all this special government series called 1811s. That's our series. It's like you're a mechanical engineer by trade. You work for Shell, you work for Halliburton, you work for Exxon.
Okay.
You're still a mechanical engineer, but you work on different projects for different companies.
Right.
We're a special agent. Either we're a special agent with FBI or a special agent with DEA or a special agent with IRS. We still all have the same authority, but we just enforce different laws. IRS special agents deal with tax evasion and money laundering.
Yeah.
DEA agents deal with narcotics. Customs agents deal with a lot of different things because we're at the border. We're present at the border, and so we enforce a lot of other agencies' laws at the border because the interior can't be it everywhere, or agriculture can't bring there when they bring in this Wagyu beef from Japan. That. So we enforce a lot of different things. So depending on what group you're in, and we're divided up into groups, fraud, money laundering, narcotics, strategic. You do investigative work. I always liken it to the Customs Service was like a big-time police department.
Yeah.
You had the uniformed officers, the guys you see on the street. Those are the inspectors at the airport. Those are the people the public sees coming in and out of the country.
Right.
Are the inspectors. The special agents are kind of like the detectives. We're the plain clothes people. We're back behind the scenes. We're downtown in the office tracing leads and stuff like that. The easiest example is like when you came in with those glass goods, if you carried them in your personal luggage.
Yeah.
And the customs inspector found them and realized, that's a violation that the inspector can't mitigate or can't handle because the value, let's say it was $50,000 worth of glassware you brought in.
That would be a lot, but okay, let's just go with that.
Yeah. So the inspector would call the agents, and one of us would come down, and we would take you and process you, take you before the magistrate, arrest you. We'd investigate where you got it, who your contacts are. Turns out that you're an unauthorized distributor of this, and it's fake glassware, or something like that. We do the investigation.
But agents in all those different agencies are all kind of like you said, you're a mechanical engineer. You go here, you go here, you have the same training, sort of the same.
Right, same training.
Right. You're all chasing down bad guys and all that. So they just haven't made a TV show about custom.
No, they haven't. They made a couple movies out of them, but we're not as popular as the FBI.
It's not. Yeah.
Which, in all honesty, works to our advantage because we can get stuff done without kind of not under the radar, but with a lot less publicity. When Customs shows up at your house, there's not going to be CNN. FBI shows up at your house, there's going to be CNN.
Paparazzi's there. Kind of. So this is why this is why Dan calls you Jim the G-Man.
I was a government agent. Yeah.
So how long were you?
I was with the government for 31 years.
Wow.
Over 30 years.
Wow.
And a lot of variety. Started out in D.C., spent 8 years in Miami.
And you came here.
And then came to Houston.
Right. And how long has it been since you...
I retired in about almost 8 or 9 years ago.
Oh, okay.
Because as a special agent, we have a mandatory retirement age that we can't go longer than, back then it was 57 years old, and we have to... And then if you make your timing grade, it's kind of like the military. If you're in long enough and you got the timing grade, you can retire before you turn 50.
Before you,
And so I took an early out at 53.
Okay.
And then went to work for private sector. Okay. Because the last half of my career, I did computer crimes, computer forensics. And that's looking at bad guys' computers and analysis. And your background should be familiar with that. It kind of evolved into e-discovery.
Oh,
that
sure,
kind of stuff. Yeah.
That's.
And so I went to work for companies doing that.
Never put anything in an email that you don't want somebody else
to see. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I learned all about that. Not the hard way. I learned all about that from seeing other people get in trouble. So you said something. So with all of your 30. So for a guy who started out, and I think you told me this beforehand, you were like, originally you weren't necessarily interested in a government job. You wanted to work for the private sector. You ended up working for the government for 31 years.
Right.
Yeah. Which turned out, and like you said, it's like the one thing that you can't really do anywhere in the private sector.
My training and background was business, right? Finance and
that's right.
Sub and accounting and marketing. So I was doing financial analysis for Brown and Root. I transitioned over to a buyer for power purchasing, buying pipes, valves, and fittings, because that's what I did during the summers. I was a pipe fitter's helper, so I was very familiar with that.
The old pipe fitter's helper.
The old pipe fitter's helper. Grind that down, will you? No. Grind it again. No. Yeah. I'm going to go get coffee. I want to. No.
Yeah.
So
that's in the hazing ritual.
Yeah, all part of growing up.
Yeah.
But I could do that in the government as well. The government has accountants. The government has financial analysts. The government has, people that analyze things and buy things and purchasing things, right?
Right.
But it was kind of my dad, being the old capitalist and private sector kind of guy, Government is good for what the government does, but it only should do certain things, not everything, which is a big deal.
Yeah. So
and we could go on into that.
I want to come back to that, actually.
Yeah. So anyway, I decided the job of a federal agent is the only job that the government has that you cannot get in the private sector. Now, private sector has security guards and bodyguards, but the private sector can investigate and arrest people and deny them their constitutional rights through process.
Right.
Through arrest power.
You're right. It's very unique. You can only,
It's unique. It's only the purview. That's one of the...
Well, you can do all those things in the private sector, but then you're part of organized crime.
Well, yeah, that's a whole other story.
Then you're part of a different kind of family.
Yeah.
But what you just said and what your dad said, the government should do certain things. And when we were talking earlier, you said at some point the purpose of the government is. But I think about it in terms of coming back to this notion of the American dream and not being one where everybody necessarily drives a fancy car and gets rich, but where everybody kind of has this fundamental opportunity. And it would seem that, and so the guy who wrote this book, again, in 1931, he's looking back and he says, this is what we've produced. We've produced this type of an environment, which was a great thing. Now we fast forward almost another 100 years, 90 years.
Right.
And you were in the government, so a third of that time you were in the government. I hope that doesn't make you feel too old.
I wish you wouldn't have put it that way. But
So it would, I don't think this is written anywhere, but if you just kind of think about it logically, which some of us still remember how to do, it would seem that the purpose of the government, just in the abstract, should be to enable and preserve that great thing which had been produced, right? And over these many decades, what the government is and what it does at various levels, not just at the federal level, because nowadays I notice most of the time if you say the government, most people think about the federal level, but there's others.
Right.
But it's moved.
Probably more important levels are state and local.
Right.
It's more important than the federal.
Yeah, they don't get on the news as much. But so what the government is and what it does has moved a lot since he wrote that.
Yes.
So
tremendously.
How do you, just in your view, being somebody who's lived in the country for your life, worked for the government, are we helping? Because the government does a lot more stuff now than it used to.
It does a lot. And why does it do more? Well, it does more because it can do more.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that it should be doing more. We've become more wealthy. We've become more productive. We've become better at what we do. We've got tremendous advancement in healthcare, tremendous advancements in communication, like the internet.
Sure. For better or worse.
For better or for worse. Cars have developed and we're progressing into, green energy and all that kind of stuff. We've made a lot of progress. We've also made a lot of progress on the social side with, when he wrote the book, and you're going to have to correct me, but I don't think Social Security was around.
No, that came around with FDR and the New Deal.
That came around with FDR.
New Deal, yeah.
So this was written at a time where people really had to take care of themselves.
Yeah.
And as you got older, who took care of you? Well, your family took care of you, or family members took care of you, or you went to a home and people took care of you that way, or the churches took care of you, or things like that.
Right.
That's been kind of replaced with the government taking care of you, and that gets into the politics and the purposes of government, and
which is okay. And we're allowed to talk about that.
We're allowed to talk about that.
Do you think, did that happen accidentally or intentionally?
No, I think it had happened intentionally. I think it happened because we wanted people to enjoy our largesse. In other words, we became wealthy. We became good. So let's give money to this group. Well, let's give money to this group. Well, we've got extra money. Let's give it to this group. And then it became more of a charity. It changed from a charity and a benefit to that group, which quickly turns into an entitlement for that group.
Right.
And that, I think, has turned into a bigger thing than we really wanted it to.
Yeah, it's kind of like it's very similar to what I observe about the economy. Once you start turning the dials to try to adjust what's happening, you just end up with more and more dial turning, and you can never really go back, right? You can't, once you start, and I'm very sympathetic to people who would like us to just drop all the Keynesian economics out of our policy, right? And just let the thing go the way it's supposed to go. The problem is we're past that. We can't, as much of a fan of free market capital, and who's the guy that Reagan brought in, the economist that fixed inflation? We should get him back right now, by the way. I don't think he's still alive. But all those ideas, the problem is that once you start fiddling with the system, it's very difficult to ever get the system back to its natural state again.
Right, which begs the question, should we be fiddling with the system, or should we let the system fiddle itself?
Right. But now that we've spent, and the same thing with social programs and things, that's kind of a hot buzzword. So let me just say, you said it very well, which was, well, the government started taking on the role of trying to help people. I mean, that sounds like a good thing to do, right?
It is. It's a benevolent thing, and it's a good thing to do. But what happens is people become enamored with that and come to expect that. They expect the help. They don't look to try to do it themselves.
Yeah.
Back when this book was written, if a farmer had a fire, if his barn burned down, the neighbors would help.
Right. He didn't file a claim with FEMA or whatever.
Right. Now, if a barn burns down, he's going to sit there and say, hey, where's my money to get this barn built?
But I also think that in some respects, we've conditioned people to think that way, or I should say, people are in the right to some extent to think that way, because I sure have paid a lot of taxes, right? We pay compared to then, we pay a lot more taxes now. So I could see where people might, I've felt that way myself sometimes, where I'm like, okay, well, I have paid a boatload of taxes in my life. I got to get something for it.
Right. Yeah.
So would you please pay for my barn to be rebuilt?
Yeah.
That's all I'm asking, right?
Yeah, but what are you paying for? And you're paying to have the barn rebuilt in Minnesota, not the one that you burnt down here in Houston.
That's right.
It's like, well, what about my barn? And then you get into, natural disasters, which are a terrible thing to happen. And then, you get into how much should we be taking care of that? How much should the local people take care of that? It's a tough question.
It is. Well, and you also get it. So coming back to the federal government versus the state and local.
Right.
I think the original idea was that I think things have, it's been like reverse gravity to the higher level, over the years, right?
That's a good way to
things
put it.
Things are rising,
right?
And the top is getting.
Well, everybody's looking to the federal government to fix all your problems.
Yeah,
and the federal government's not going to fix all your problems.
Yeah, they can't.
The state government probably is not going to fix all your problems.
Yeah.
The local government may help, but what we've lost, I think, Michael, is the ability of, hey, I can take care of this problem. I could figure out how to handle this. I need to maybe work more hours. I need to maybe study a little bit more.
Right.
Maybe I need to do some other stuff. Maybe I should, quit drinking so much. Maybe that's causing problems.
What are you saying?
Oh, no, but in other words, take
right.
care of it yourself.
Evaluate yourself, and
then if I can't do it, then I'm going to go to Dan, or I'm going to come to you, or I'm going to say, hey, I need some help doing this.
Yeah.
I'm not going to. Anyway, we get.
Yeah, that gets. But
it gets back to what's the role of the government? What's the purpose of the government, be it federal, state, or local?
Yeah.
And in my view, it's always been to provide services, to build roads, to protect the infrastructure, protect borders,
right?
To pay for the military, to have a good military,
right?
And things like that. Not necessarily to fund research into solar panels out there. Now, government funding of some research is fine, but where you get into the mistake, and you being a more of a private sector guy than I am, why not let the private sector develop things? The example I think of is this recent, electric cars, and all that kind of stuff. And my grandfather, who was lucky enough to see 3 centuries, born in 1898,
wow,
died in 2000.
Wow.
He saw the advent of the automobile.
Yeah.
And, the cars and the development of that. When cars came out, people had to have fuel. They had to have gasoline.
Yeah.
Okay. Maybe we better make some gas stations every 30 miles. Mm-hmm. So you had Esso and Exxon and Humboldt Oil providing refueling stations for this new technology that came out.
Yeah.
We've got new technology coming out now, these electric vehicles, but who is providing the charging stations?
Yeah.
Not the BPs, not the Sunocos, but the government is doing it.
Yeah.
And I think there's going to be a problem when you have the government try to do something that should probably be better done by the capitalist market.
We and some of those companies are beginning to get
Right,
into some
but
of those.
you're
many times
putting
it's
the
government
cart way before the
subsidy, right?
horse.
Yeah.
On this stuff.
Right.
If people want electric cars, they'll buy electric cars, and people are going to be thinking like, okay, I need to refuel these. I'm going to start buying up gas stations and putting in charging stations around there.
There was a very loud noise there. I don't know what that. I don't know what that was, but I saw a very funny picture the other day. Floating around, and it was supposedly in California. I don't know if the picture was really taken in California, but I think the implication was because they've been having some trouble keeping the grid on, right, and I come from the oil and gas and energy industry, so I know a little something about that. But
Sure.
In this picture, there was somebody with had a Tesla parked in their driveway. It wasn't the expensive Tesla. It was just the
regular Tesla. Yep.
And in the driveway, and they were charging the Tesla in the driveway, and the power cable was connected to a gasoline generator.
Yeah. Of course, filing that up.
because there wasn't any electricity. Right. And you and you go, to your point, when you leave industry and the market to, now I'm sure there's many educated people who can mount an argument to this, but in my observation, it seems like if you let the private sector, the market kind of come up with the solutions. Maybe everything doesn't happen in the timing that you want it to. Maybe you'd like to see, a faster demise of the evil oil and gas companies, right? But you get there in a more sort of sustainable, resilient way.
Yeah,
right?
and that's a great point, because what's the profit motive? If I'm a bookseller and I'm selling books, I'm going to make money selling books, and then I'll get more money. I could buy more books and sell more books.
Right.
What's the government do to sell something? Where's their profit? Where's their incentive to build a better book or to buy more books? They get the money from us, from you and me.
Right.
They're not generating any income.
No.
And to your point about
they might be generating votes.
They might,
which is a different type of capital. But but that's the point, and that comes back again to, I think, if we're trying to pursue or maintain the American dream, meaning this, not each person's individual dream, but this general place that we have.
To achieve the dream. We still need to maintain that ability to achieve the dream. You look around here in Houston, well, you look at Dan's a perfect example.
Yeah.
How he started this company and what he did to do it. I mean, he's just a regular
He's not even
guy.
that smart, really.
No, he really isn't.
I mean, he was in the right place at the right time.
Yeah, but there are thousands of stories you can tell like that of small businesses. I work part-time at a dive shop. I'm a scuba diver, and the guy who owns the dive shop.
I first heard dive bar.
Dive bar, yeah.
Dive shop, okay.
Dive shop.
Different thing.
Scuba diving. He started the business, and he grew the business, and he runs the business, he does very well. And just like a lot of other people around here, they're small business owners, but they're what make America work.
Yeah. In fact, I'm hoping to have, I will have eventually, once I can get him on the schedule, on the show, because I'm promising people from all walks of life. I have the bar manager from the Petroleum Club in Houston.
Oh.
And Carl I don't know Carl's last name. I just know Carl and his phone number. Carl's fantastic. So if you've ever been to the Petroleum Club, I don't know if you've been to the new one versus the old one.
Years ago,
Yeah.
I think my dad took us.
Yeah.
He showed the. In fact, we went up there, and I remember we were going down the elevator, and my dad nudged me, and I was a kid at junior high, and he said, "That's Ben Love." And I said, "Ben Love, really?" Who was the chairman? Ben Love was the chairman of Allied Bank.
Yeah.
Back then, or Texas Commerce, or one of
them.
those.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and it was just anyway.
Yeah, you see. So Carl, I recently met Carl, and Carl has got lots of opinions on lots of things, and but he's the bar manager at the Petroleum Club, and he has a very interesting perspective. Particularly, he likes to talk about old Houston versus new Houston, because Carl's about my age, actually maybe a little bit older than me, and he likes to talk about old Houston versus new Houston. And of course that will only be really, I mean, that's relevant to people in Houston, but I think you can kind of abstract that to the experience in general. But great stories from people who have all found ways to achieve. You know, it's not that their lives are beautiful and perfect. It's that they're finding ways to do what they want to do and to have.
They've succeeded and they've failed. They succeeded and failed. You know, you hear stories about that all throughout in Texas about, you know, buy and bust, boom and bust all the time.
Oh yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
And they get up and start over. They don't look to the government for handouts. They don't look for the government to solve their problems. Now, when there's a whole lot of rain that comes down and the dams kind of open up and things kind of flood all over the place, you got a bigger problem than you and I can handle.
Right.
Then the government can step in, provide help, and provide, which they did.
Right.
And you and
it was you got done quite well, actually. Yeah.
You've done quite well. You know, just to touch briefly on when Harvey happened, we didn't get flooded, but we were landlocked for 10 days. But our house was situated at a high point on the flooded street that a lot of the boats launched kind of in our front yard. And you had people from all over the country. You had the Cajun Navy, you had Alabama Power and Light, you had Arizona people coming in, you had people from all over coming to help us out. It wasn't the government coming in to help us. It was the other agency. Now the government was there, you know, patrolling, doing that. That's where everybody can come in and help each other out.
Yeah, you're right. Even then, there's a level, I think a lot of times, I think that today, if you walk down the street today and you just stop anybody and ask them a question about the government, if you just say the government, I think 9 out of 10 people that you ask, probably more than that, will assume that you mean the federal government. That's what they will think of first. And we've almost lost because we don't really, and this is a whole other episode about a collection of states versus a whole country, but we've lost sort of cognizant, like awareness of all the things in between.
And why have
some
we
of which
done
are
that?
government and some of which aren't government, as you mentioned.
But why is that? Why? Because if you watch the cable news people, the cable news people are not talking about what happened in Sugar Land last week at the school board meeting. They're talking about some national thing up in Indiana with the governor or something like that. So you don't have the local news programs like you used to, and that's all you used to have. If you remember, you had the 10 o'clock news, and that was about it. If you want to find out what was going on in the nation, you watched the 5 o'clock news, but that was only a half hour.
Right.
Kind of a thing. So
and there was, when you got the paper, there was a little bit of that.
But the paper was the local news.
Mostly,
and I hadn't really thought about how you said that, but the national news outlets are reporting on the national news and the federal government.
Right. And the only time they report on something that's happening locally is when it has some sort of kind of inflammatory connection to something that's happening on the national level, right?
Yeah. Well,
so
states doing this.
But they don't really talk about how how the local, power company came in to a school board meeting and helped them solve a problem with whatever it was,
air
right?
conditioning or
something.
a new way to do something like that.
And so we don't really even think on those levels. But like you said, with Harvey, the big flood that we had here,
Right,
54 inches of rain in 5 minutes, and there were all kinds of people helping, all kinds of companies and organizations that were there helping.
Well, just like in Katrina, just like in other areas where there's natural disasters, we go over and help other people, and people come over and help us. That's we're relying on our neighbors to do something. We're not relying on the government to do something, except doing something only the government can do. Such as build giant reservoirs, or maybe put in a seawall. Down in Galveston.
Controlling the weather, I feel like they should be. We had Back to the Future came out in 1985. I remember I saw it in the theater, and there were two things that we were supposed to have by now, right? One of them was flying cars, and the other was a weather service that could control the weather. And we have neither one of those. We got nothing from that. It's been a huge disappointment. But this has not been a disappointment. I'm looking at so Trevor set the time here to remind me to stop talking. And we've been talking for plenty of time. So Jim Martin, thanks for
thanks for
making time.
Me, Michael.
I know we just kind of threw you into this, and you didn't really you just kind of showed up.
I added some stuff, and appreciate the opportunity. Look forward to doing these some more. And good luck to you and your podcast.
Yeah, no, thank you. He'll tell us afterwards if we were any good. We'll find out here in just a minute. All right. That's going to do it. Thanks.